The chamber stretched so far into the darkness that Marcus Cole could not see where it ended. Crystalline walls rose thousands of feet above him, covered with symbols and emblems from civilizations that had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. 847 species had sent their representatives to this place, and every single one of them was staring at the 12 humans standing at the center of the floor. Marcus had spent 20 years as a diplomatic negotiator for the United Nations. He had faced down dictators, warlords, and corporate executives who controlled more wealth than most nations. None of that had prepared him for this moment that High Chancellor Vorith, a being made entirely of shifting gravitational fields that bent. Light around its form, spoke with a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The translation implant behind Marcus's ear converted the alien words into English, but it could not remove the weight of judgment in that voice. Species designation human. Origin world Sol 3, locally called Earth. You stand accused before the galactic assembly of the most significant property violation in recorded history. The systematic collection, concealment, and activation of 2,847 spacecraft belonging to 193 member civilizations. The estimated value of this theft exceeds 2 trillion galactic standard credits. How does your species answer these charges? Marcus felt the eyes of the galaxy upon him. Behind him, his delegation waited in silence. They had prepared for this moment for 6 months, ever since the Kethari diplomatic vessel had arrived in Earth orbit and demanded humanity's immediate appearance before the assembly. He stepped forward. His footsteps echoed in the impossible vastness of the chamber. High Chancellor, I must respectfully correct the characterization of these events. Humanity did not steal these spacecraft. We collected them. Under Article 4, 147 of the Galactic Charter, which I believe the Kethari delegation helped draft 4,000 standard cycles ago. A ripple of reaction moved through the assembled representatives. The Kethari ambassador, an insectoid being whose compound eyes reflected the chamber's light in fractured patterns, rose from its position. You dare invoke our own laws against us? These were not abandoned vessels. They were research stations, diplomatic cruisers, military scouts left in temporary positions while their crews conducted operations. Temporary positions that lasted, in some cases, for over a century, Marcus replied calmly. Your own charter defines abandoned property as any vessel left unclaimed for more than 50 standard cycles. Every spacecraft in our inventory meets that definition, most exceeded by decades. High Chancellor Vorith's form flickered with something that might have been surprise. Ambassador Cole, even if your legal interpretation holds merit, you must explain how a species that achieved interstellar capability merely 47 standard cycles ago managed to locate, retrieve, repair, and conceal nearly 3,000 alien spacecraft without anyone in the galaxy noticing. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. To answer that question, High Chancellor, I need to tell you about a mechanic named Victor Webb and what he found in the basement of an abandoned garage in the Nevada desert. The chamber fell silent. Every alien representative leaned forward, waiting to hear the story that had brought humanity to this moment of judgment. And so, Marcus began to tell them. Victor Webb had been fixing engines for 34 years. He had grease permanently embedded in the lines of his palms. He could identify an engine problem by sound alone, and he had never met a machine he could not repair. At 56 years old, he had just spent his entire retirement savings on a property that the real estate listing described as a unique opportunity in the remote Nevada desert. The garage sat 70 miles from the nearest town, accessible only by a dirt road that had not been maintained since the 1950s. The previous owner had died without any family, and the property had been stuck in legal complications for nearly 20 years before finally going to auction. Victor had bought it for 3 reasons. First, The price was incredibly low. Second, he wanted to disappear from the world for a while, after his daughter moved overseas. Third, the auction listing included a photograph of what appeared to be a 1967 Shelby GT 500 sitting under a dusty cover in the main bay. What Victor found when he arrived was considerably more complicated. The garage itself was unremarkable. Corrugated metal walls, concrete floor, rusted bay doors, and a small office that smelled of mold and decades-old coffee. The Shelby was there, exactly as promised, and it would need substantial work. Victor spent his first week simply cleaning the space, organizing the scattered tools and parts, and deliberately ignoring the padlocked steel door in the back corner that the property documents listed as basement storage. On the 8th day, his curiosity finally won. He cut the padlock with bolt cutters and opened the door. The stairs went down much further than any basement should go. Victor counted 53 steps before he reached the bottom, his flashlight cutting through air that smelled of electricity. And something else, something that reminded him of the air before a thunderstorm. The basement was not a basement. It was a hangar. Victor stood at the edge of an underground cavern that stretched at least 300 meters in every direction. Industrial lighting flickered to life as motion sensors detected his presence, illuminating rows of vehicles that his mind first tried to classify as experimental aircraft, then immediately rejected that explanation. They were spacecraft. Obviously, unmistakably, impossibly spacecraft. The nearest one looked like someone had crossed a stealth fighter with a manta ray, its surface a matte black that seemed to drink light. Beyond it sat something that resembled a chrome sphere covered with sensor arrays. Further back, he could see vessels of every shape imaginable. Discs, triangles, organic curves that suggested they had been grown rather than manufactured. Victor did what any reasonable person would do. He sat down on the bottom step, put his head between his knees, and focused on breathing until the spots stopped dancing in his vision. Then he did what any reasonable mechanic would do. He walked to the nearest spacecraft and started looking for the engine dot. The files he found in a control room built into the cavern wall told an incredible story. Starting in 1947, a secret program within the United States government had been quietly collecting alien spacecraft. Not the crashed ones that went to the famous facilities and became the subject of conspiracy theories. These were the ones that had simply been left behind, abandoned by alien visitors who apparently treated Earth the way tourists treated highway rest stops. The program had operated for decades, its budget hidden in classified funding, its existence known to fewer than 50 people at any time. When those people retired or died, knowledge of the program died with them. By 1989, the last person who knew about the Nevada facility had suffered a fatal stroke, and the entire operation had simply been forgotten. Victor spent 3 weeks exploring the hangar and reading the files. He cataloged 63 distinct vessels from what the documents identified as over 40 different species. Most were listed as non-operational, with technical problems that the original research teams had never been able to solve. Then he found the maintenance log for Spacecraft Unit 47, described as a Cathare long-range scout, abandoned in Mars orbit and retrieved in 1962. The log noted that the vessel's primary propulsion system was non-functional due to what appeared to be a cracked intake manifold. Victor read that sentence 3 times. A cracked intake manifold. He had rebuilt intake manifolds on everything from pickup trucks to fishing boats. The file included photographs of the damage, crystalline components that had fractured along stress, lines, exactly the kind of failure that occurred when thermal expansion was not properly accounted for in the design. He could fix that. He walked to Spacecraft Unit 47, found the engine compartment, and got to work. What Victor did not know was that his first successful repair would activate a dormant tracking signal. a signal that the Cathari had installed in all their vessels centuries ago. A signal that would tell them their abandoned scout was suddenly, impossibly, operational again. That signal would travel across the galaxy, and it would bring humanity before the judgment of the Galactic Assembly. The Cathari signal took 4 months to reach its destination, and another 2 months for the response to travel back. During that time, Victor Webb repaired 11 more spacecraft. He had not intended to continue. Every night he told himself he would contact someone the next morning. The government, NASA, perhaps even a journalist. But every morning he found himself drawn back to the hangar instead. The engineering was unlike anything he had ever encountered, and yet it was also completely familiar. Engines were engines. Fuel systems were fuel systems. The principles that made machines work were the same whether the machine was built on Earth or in a distant star system. Victor documented everything. Thousands of photographs, hundreds of hours of video. Detailed notes in his careful handwriting. He learned that different species had different engineering philosophies. The Cathari built for efficiency and redundancy. The chrome spheres he eventually identified as pallid construction prioritized easy repairs, with every component designed to be quickly replaced. On the day the Cathari response signal arrived, Victor was lying underneath a triangular vessel, the files called Unknown Origin, trying to figure out why its gravity dampening system kept overheating. He did not hear anything unusual. He did not know anything had happened until motion sensors triggered at the hangar entrance. He rolled out from under the spacecraft to find 4 people in dark suits standing at the bottom of the stairs. The woman in front was tall with silver streaks in her black hair. She moved like someone who had spent years in the military. She held up an identification badge. "Mr. Webb, I am Colonel Patricia Dunn, United States Space Force. I need you to step away from the alien spacecraft and come with us immediately." Victor wiped his hands on his coveralls. "You folks are about 50 years late. I have already voided most of the warranties." Colonel Dunn did not smile. "Mr. Webb, 22 minutes ago, our deep space monitoring network detected a signal originating from this location. That signal appears to have received a response from outside our solar system. We need to know exactly what you have done here. I fixed some engines, mostly intake manifolds and cooling systems. You would not believe how many advanced civilizations do not account for thermal expansion properly. Mr. Webb." The colonel's voice could have cut through steel. "The response signal we detected appears to be military in nature. Based on our analysis, you have just informed hostile alien species that their missing spacecraft is operational and located on Earth. We estimate they will arrive in approximately 14 months. Victor sat down on a nearby storage crate. "Oh, indeed. Now I need you to tell me everything you know about this facility. And then I need you to help us determine if any of these spacecraft can actually fly." Victor looked at the rows of alien vessels, at the engineering puzzles he had been happily solving for months, at the impossible situation he had accidentally created. "Colonel, I am just a mechanic. I fix things. I do not know how to pilot spacecraft." Dunn's expression softened slightly. "That is acceptable, Mr. Webb. We have pilots. What we do not have is anyone who understands how these engines work. The original research teams are all dead. You are the only person alive who has successfully repaired alien technology." She paused. "Additionally, based on files we have retrieved from government archives, this is not the only facility of its kind." Victor felt the blood drain from his face. "What do you mean?" "I mean there are 19 other facilities like this one scattered across the United States. Between them, we estimate there are approximately 450 alien spacecraft that were collected between 1947 and 1989. Most of them are non-operational. She fixed him with an intense stare. Most of them have problems similar to the ones you have already repaired. You want me to fix all of them. The survival of our planet may depend on it. Victor thought about his quiet retirement. He thought about his daughter, who had always joked that he loved engines more than anything else. He thought about the intake manifold on the Kethari Scout, the satisfying precision of putting everything back together correctly. I am going to need a bigger team and much better coffee. Over the next 8 months, Victor Webb became the most important mechanic in human history. Colonel Dunn assembled a team of 35 mechanics, engineers, and technicians from across the country. They were the best in their respective fields, all sworn to absolute secrecy. Victor trained them in the principles he had discovered, the commonalities between alien engineering systems, the ways that ordinary Earth-based skills could be adapted to extraterrestrial vehicles. They called themselves the Garage. The original Nevada facility became their headquarters. But teams spread out to the other 19 sites. They found spacecraft from over 40 different species. Some were so strange that even Victor could not determine how to activate them. Others were so straightforward that junior mechanics could have them running within days. 6 months into the project, Colonel Dunn delivered news that changed everything. The United States was not the only nation collecting abandoned alien technology, she said during a classified briefing. The British have a facility underneath the Isle of Wight. The Russians have 4 sites scattered across Siberia. China has been running a collection program since 1961. There are smaller operations in Brazil, Australia, Japan, South Africa, and India. Victor was in the middle of rebuilding a propulsion system. How many total spacecraft are we looking at? Current global count is approximately 2,400 vessels, plus the 450 we already knew about. Not all of them are repairable, but our teams are having more success than anyone expected. Do the other countries know about the incoming signal? They do now. For the first time in human history, every major world power has agreed to cooperate on a single project. The political implications are unprecedented. Dunn paused. They are calling it the Earth Defense Initiative officially, but everyone in the briefings just calls it what your people call it. The Garage? The Garage. Victor tightened a bolt that matched no known standard size. Colonel, I have to ask something. These spacecraft we are repairing, they work. Some of them are faster and more powerful than anything humanity has ever built. Why were they not used before? Why did they sit in forgotten hangars for decades? Dunn was quiet for a long moment. Because we could not make them work. The original research teams tried for years. They could never figure out the engineering. The prevailing theory was that alien technology was simply too advanced for human minds to comprehend. That is ridiculous. Engineering is engineering. You just have to approach it like a mechanic instead of a scientist trying to write papers about theoretical frameworks. That is exactly what the president said when I briefed him. He asked how a retired automobile mechanic from Nevada managed to solve problems that stumped the best minds in the country for 40 years. She almost smiled. I told him it was because you approached every problem the same way. Find what is broken. Figure out why it broke. Fix it or replace it. Simple. The universe is not as complicated as people want it to be. Tell that to the aliens who are coming. Speaking of which, we have intercepted additional transmissions. They are not just sending one ship. They are filing a formal complaint with something called the Galactic Assembly. Apparently, there is an interstellar government, and they are accusing humanity of theft on a massive scale. Victor set down his tools. We did not steal anything. We found it. They left it behind. That is going to be our legal argument. But according to our analysts, the Galactic Assembly has very specific rules about property rights, and we may not have a strong case. She handed him a tablet. These are the relevant provisions of something called the Assembly Charter. I need your assessment of every spacecraft in our inventory. Specifically, whether each one qualifies as legally abandoned under these definitions. Victor read the provisions carefully. His eyebrows rose higher with each paragraph. Colonel, according to this, anything left unclaimed for 50 standard cycles, which our analysts say equals about 42 Earth years, becomes legal salvage property. Most of the spacecraft in our inventory have been sitting in those hangars for 60 years or more. That is what our legal team is hoping. But we need documentation. We need proof of exactly when each spacecraft arrived and when it was last claimed by its original owners. I have that. All the original facilities kept detailed records. Dates, locations, retrieval methods. Everything is in the files. For the first time since Victor had met her, Colonel Patricia Dunn smiled genuinely. Mr. Webb, I think you might have just saved the planet. Now let me tell you about the other thing I need from you. What other thing? I need you to teach our pilots how to fly these spacecraft. And I need it done in 6 months, because that is when the aliens arrive. And they are bringing witnesses from across the galaxy. The Cathari delegation arrived precisely on schedule, accompanied by observers from 15 other assembly species. Their flagship, a vessel the size of a small city, took up orbit around the moon. It was positioned directly above the site of humanity's largest lunar research station. Victor watched the arrival from the Nevada facility's newly installed command center. Surrounded by his team of mechanics, who had been working 18-hour days for the past 6 months. They brought lawyers, Colonel Dunn reported, her face grim as she reviewed the initial communications. Many lawyers, and something called an enforcement fleet. Victor looked at the screens showing the Cathari flagship, the dozens of smaller vessels surrounding it, the cold and distant stars beyond. How many of our spacecraft are operational? As of this morning, 1,847. Another 600 are close to ready, repairable within weeks. The rest need more time than we have. Trained pilots? 418 fully qualified. Another 300 in various stag. Ease of training. Victor calculated the numbers silently. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an interstellar civilization that had been traveling between stars when humans were still discovering fire. But they had something the Cathari did not expect. They had a garage full of spacecraft from every major civilization in the galaxy. Vessels with weapons and defensive systems that their original owners had developed over centuries of competition with each other. Spacecraft that, thanks to 18 months of exhausting work, were now crewed by humans who understood them completely. Colonel, what happens if the legal argument fails? Dunn met his eyes with a steady gaze. Then we defend our planet with whatever means necessary. They expect us to have a few ships at most. They are not expecting this. No, they are certainly not. Victor looked at the screens showing the enforcement fleet and its weapons platforms deployed around Earth's orbit, and let us hope the lawyers succeed. And if they do not, the Cathari are going to learn something important about threatening a mechanic's garage. The Galactic Assembly's mobile judicial platform arrived 3 days after the Cathari. It was exactly what Victor Webb expected from a bureaucracy that had been operating for 10,000 years. A structure of impossible complexity designed to intimidate, covered with symbols representing centuries of legal precedent and decisions that had shaped the fate of countless worlds. Ambassador Marcus Cole had been appointed as humanity's representative to the Assembly 6 months earlier. When the scale of the coming crisis became clear, he had spent those months studying galactic law, learning Assembly procedures, and preparing for what he privately called the most important legal argument in human history. Victor had spent those same months teaching pilots to fly alien spacecraft and hoping the legal argument would make the flying Unnecessary. Now he stood in the observation gallery of the judicial platform, watching as Marcus Cole faced the Kethari delegation across a chamber designed to hold representatives from hundreds of species. The Kethari ambassador had been speaking for nearly an hour, listing grievances in precise detail. Therefore, the species known as humans have systematically violated the property rights of 193 member civilizations. They have stolen technology far beyond their developmental level. They have refused to return this technology when its rightful owners requested it. And most seriously, they have repaired and activated spacecraft that pose a direct threat to galactic security. The ambassador's compound eyes glittered in the chamber's light. We demand immediate confiscation of all alien technology currently held by humanity. Reparations totaling 2.3 trillion galactic standard credits. And permanent restrictions on human expansion beyond their home system. High Chancellor Vorith turned attention to the human delegation. Ambassador Cole, you have heard the charges presented against your species. The Kethari have submitted extensive documentation showing that the spacecraft in question were registered to member civilizations at the time of their alleged theft. How do you respond? Marcus Cole stood. In this chamber full of beings who could reshape matter and bend space, he looked remarkably small. He also appeared completely unintimidated. High Chancellor, I would like to begin by addressing the fundamental assumption underlying the Kethari accusation. They claim that humans stole these spacecraft. We did not steal them. We collected them. The Kethari ambassador's antennae quivered with agitation. There is no meaningful distinction. With respect, Ambassador, there is an enormous distinction. It is spelled out clearly in Article 447 of the Assembly Charter. Marcus activated a holographic display showing the relevant text. Section 12 states that any vessel, structure, or technology left unattended and unclaimed in the territory of a developing civilization for a period exceeding 50 standard cycles shall be considered abandoned. Such abandoned items may be claimed as salvage by any spacefaring civilization, including the civilization in whose territory the items were found. A murmur of surprise moved through the assembled representatives. The Kethari ambassador rose immediately. Article 447 refers specifically to developing civilizations. Humans have achieved interstellar capability. They are no longer eligible for its protections. Humans achieved interstellar capability 47 standard cycles ago, Marcus countered smoothly. The oldest spacecraft in our inventory was abandoned 147 standard cycles ago, when my species had not yet invented radio communication. The most recent spacecraft we collected was abandoned 53 standard cycles ago, still within the 50-cycle window. Every single vessel in our inventory was collected before humanity became spacefaring. Most were abandoned long before any of you even knew we existed. This is merely wordplay designed to obscure your crimes. This is your law, Ambassador. The Assembly Charter, which the Kethari themselves helped draft 4,000 standard cycles ago, specifically to protect developing species from exploitation by more advanced civilizations. You created Article 447 to ensure that spacefaring species would not use abandoned technology as an excuse to strip developing worlds of their resources. Marcus's voice sharpened with conviction. You never anticipated that a developing species would figure out how to repair that technology. That is not theft. That is resourcefulness. The trial continued for 3 days. Each side presented evidence and counter-evidence, witnesses and expert testimony. Victor watched from the gallery, surrounded by his mechanics. As Marcus Cole systematically dismantled every argument the Kethari attempted to make, when they claimed the spacecraft were not truly abandoned, but merely temporarily unattended. Marcus presented maintenance logs showing that several vessels had been sitting in Earth's orbit for over 2 centuries. Their automatic beacon signals had been transmitting coordinates continuously, coordinates that no one ever came to retrieve. When they argued that humans had no right to repair technology they did not understand, Marcus called Victor to testify. The mechanic spent 4 hours explaining in precise technical detail exactly how he had diagnosed and repaired each type of engine failure. He demonstrated that human mechanical skills were not only applicable to alien technology, but in many cases produced superior results to the original engineering. The Cathari intake manifold design has a fundamental flaw. Victor explained to a chamber full of beings who had built starships before humanity discovered fire. You do not account for crystalline thermal expansion under sustained use. I fixed this problem by adding a buffer zone between the intake and the combustion chamber. It is the same principle we use in automobile engines on Earth. Basic engineering. When the Cathari claimed that humanity's collection of spacecraft posed a threat to galactic security, Marcus asked a simple question that silenced the chamber. A threat to whose security, Ambassador? These spacecraft are purely defensive technology, located entirely within human-controlled space. We have not used them aggressively. We have not threatened any assembly member. The only threat currently present is the enforcement fleet surrounding our homeworld, with weapons platforms aimed at our cities. The Cathari ambassador struggled to formulate a response. Representatives from other species exchanged glances that clearly communicated discomfort. Even across vast differences in biology and culture. On the 4th day, High Chancellor Vorith called for a recess to consider the evidence. The human delegation returned to their quarters aboard the judicial platform. Exhausted and uncertain about the outcome, Victor found Marcus Cole standing at a viewport, staring at Earth. The blue planet hung in darkness, surrounded by the ominous shapes of the enforcement fleet's weapons platforms. "How do you think it went?" Victor asked quietly. Marcus did not turn around. "Legally, we have a strong case. Stronger than I expected. The precedents are clear, and the Cathari know it. Their own laws support our position. But laws only matter if people choose to follow them. If the Cathari decide to ignore the ruling, there is nothing the Assembly can actually do to stop them. The enforcement mechanisms are purely diplomatic. Sanctions, trade restrictions, damage to reputation. None of that matters to a species that has already decided. Humanity is a threat requiring elimination." Victor thought about the 1800 spacecraft hidden in hangars across Earth, the pilots waiting for orders, the mechanics ready to make emergency repairs in the middle of combat. We are not helpless. No, but we are outnumbered, outgunned, and facing a species with thousands of years of military experience. Marcus finally turned to face him. "Mr. Webb, I need to ask you directly. If this goes badly, if the ruling goes against us, or if the Cathari simply ignore it, can we actually fight them?" Victor considered the question carefully. He thought about the Cathari scout he had repaired first, its systems and capabilities, the dozens of similar vessels his teams had restored to operational status. He thought about the pallid cruisers with their advanced weapons, the unknown origin fighters with their impossible maneuverability, the massive Dreth carriers that could deploy entire wings at smaller craft. "Ambassador, I am just a mechanic. I do not know anything about tactics or military strategy, but I understand machines. And the machines we have repaired are excellent. Some of them are significantly better than anything the Cathari have brought with them. The question is not whether we can fight. The question is whether we can win. And can we?" Victor looked out at the enforcement fleet, at the weapons platforms and military vessels, an overwhelming display of power. "I think the Cathari are about to learn something important about humans. We do not just build things. We fix things. We take what is broken, and we make it work again. Over the past 18 months, we have fixed many of their broken ships. Vessels they abandoned because they could not figure out what was wrong with them. Ships with problems that their own engineers could not solve. What exactly are you saying? I am saying that if this becomes a fight, the Kethari will be facing their own technology. Technology that we have repaired and improved. Technology that we understand better than they do, because we had to take it completely apart to fix it. He paused, meeting the ambassador's eyes. I am saying we may not be as outgunned as they believe. The recess ended with an announcement that sent shockwaves through the chamber. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, Chancellor Voreth declared, "The Judicial Council of the Galactic Assembly has reached a preliminary ruling. The evidence clearly establishes that the spacecraft in question meet the legal definition of abandoned property under Article 447 of the Assembly Charter. The humans collected these vessels in accordance with galactic law. Their subsequent repair of these vessels, while unprecedented, does not constitute theft or any other violation of Assembly regulations. Therefore, the Judicial Council rules in favor of the human delegation. The salvage claims are legally valid. The spacecraft are human property. The demand for reparations is denied. The Kethari delegation erupted in fury. Their ambassador's translation came through his barely coherent outrage. This ruling is unacceptable. It completely ignores the fundamental threat posed by human possession of this technology. We formally demand the ruling is final. Voreth interrupted firmly. Then the Kethari ambassador spoke words that changed everything. The Kethari Concordat does not accept this ruling. We formally withdraw from these proceedings and invoke Article 892 of the Assembly Charter, the right of any member civilization to unilaterally defend its security interests when diplomatic solutions have failed. The chamber exploded into chaos. High Chancellor Voreth's form flickered with visible distress. Ambassador, Article 892 has not been invoked in 3,000 standard cycles. You understand the full implications of this action? We understand perfectly. The humans represent an unacceptable threat. The Assembly has failed to neutralize that threat through legal means. We will neutralize it ourselves. The ambassador turned to face Marcus Cole directly. You have won your legal victory, human. Now you will face the consequences of what you have collected. Victor watched as the Kethari delegation departed. Through the viewport, he could see the enforcement fleet beginning to move. Weapons platforms repositioning. Military vessels forming into attack formations. They had 14 hours until the fleet reached weapons range of Earth. 14 hours to determine if humanity's collection of salvaged spacecraft could stand against the full military might of an interstellar civilization. Colonel Dunn's voice crackled through the communication system as Victor descended the stairs into the Nevada hangar. The Assembly has formally condemned the Kethari action, but they will not intervene. They are classifying this as an internal security matter. We are completely on our own. We expected that, Victor replied. He reached the hangar floor and surveyed his domain. Dozens of spacecraft in various states of readiness. Teams of mechanics running final checks on systems that would be entering combat within hours. What is our current status? 1,847 spacecraft confirmed fully operational. Another 200 that can fly, but have limited combat capability. We are positioning those around major population centers for last resort defense. Dunn paused briefly. The Kethari fleet numbers approximately 300 warships, plus the enforcement fleet's weapons platforms. They outgun us by a factor of roughly 6 to 1. Then we will need to be considerably smarter than them. Victor walked to the Kethari Scout, the first spacecraft he had ever repaired, the one that had started all of this. What about the other species represented in our collection? The ones whose ships we have been repairing? That is actually the interesting development. Our intelligence analysts have been studying the Kethari fleet composition very carefully. They are using the same technology they deployed 100 years ago. Same weapons, same shields, same propulsion systems. They have not upgraded anything significant. Victor knelt beside the scout's engine housing. He had rebuilt this engine 3 times during the training period, learning every weakness and capability. Why would they not upgrade? Because they never needed to. They have been the dominant military power in their sector for centuries. They have not faced a genuine threat in living memory. Their technology works adequately, so they stopped innovating completely. Dunn's voice carried grim satisfaction. Meanwhile, the other species kept developing. The pallid cruisers we repaired have weapon systems that are 2 full generations ahead of Cathari standard equipment. The Dreth carriers have shield technology the Cathari have never even encountered. So we are going to fight them with their neighbors' technology. We are going to fight them with the best technology from every species that has ever visited Earth and left something behind. The Cathari have never faced an enemy quite like this. Neither has anyone else. We are a patchwork fleet assembled from spare parts, but those parts represent the galaxy's finest engineering from dozens of different civilizations. Victor stood and looked around the hangar. His mechanics were everywhere, making final adjustments, running diagnostic sequences, preparing spacecraft that had sat dormant for decades to face actual combat for the first time. Colonel, I need authorization to implement something I have been developing. I call it the Garage Protocol. Explain. It is a network system. Every spacecraft we have repaired has been equipped with a diagnostic transmitter that reports to a central hub here in this facility. During combat, I will be able to monitor every system failure across the entire fleet in real time. I can direct repair teams, prioritize emergency resources, even talk pilots through field repairs if they have enough experience to attempt them. You want to run maintenance command for the entire fleet, from a garage in Nevada. It is a very large garage. Dunn actually laughed. It was the first genuine laugh Victor had heard from her since the crisis began. Authorization granted. God help us all, but authorization granted. Humanity's fleet launched 12 hours before the Cathari reached weapons range. They rose from hidden hangars across the planet, a scattered constellation of lights that had never flown together before. Victor watched from the Nevada Command Center, surrounded by screens displaying telemetry from nearly 2,000 spacecraft. The displays flickered with continuous data streams, engine temperatures, shield capacities, weapons charges, navigation coordinates. The information was overwhelming and beautiful simultaneously. Fleet Command, this is Garage, he announced through the command channel. All systems are showing green across the board. You have the best machines humanity has ever fielded. Now go show them what we can do with their abandoned equipment. The fleet commander, Admiral James Rodriguez, responded from the bridge of a Dreth carrier designated as the flagship. Copy that, Garage. Moving to engagement positions now. Victor watched as the fleet organized itself into combat formations. The heavy Dreth carriers took the center, their massive frames bristling with point defense weapons and fighter deployment bays. Pallid cruisers flanked them on both sides, their chrome surfaces reflecting starlight. Dozens of smaller craft spread out in screening patterns. Cathari scouts, unknown origin fighters, vessels from species that humanity could not even name yet. It was the most diverse combat force ever assembled in galactic history. Every vessel was different. Every pilot was adapting to technology their species had never designed. It should have been complete chaos. Instead, it was something Victor could only describe as determined resourcefulness. Admiral, a voice came through the tactical channel. Lieutenant Elena Vasquez, an ace combat pilot, now flying a pallid interceptor. Multiple contacts detected on the primary approach vector. Cathari Advance Force, approximately 40 ships incoming. Confirmed. All units maintain formation. Do not engage until they enter optimal weapons range. Victor watched the telemetry as the advance force closed the distance. The Cathari ships moved in a standard attack pattern they had probably used successfully for centuries against less advanced opponents. They expected the human fleet to scatter in panic. Instead, the human fleet waited with discipline. Targets are in range, Elena reported. Weapons solutions confirmed across all forward units. All units fire. The space between the opposing fleets erupted in brilliant light. Victor's screens blazed with data as weapons discharged across the entire engagement zone. Pallid plasma cannons, Dref kinetic accelerators, Cathari-designed beam weapons that the original owners had never maintained properly, but now functioned at peak efficiency. When the light faded, 12 Cathari ships were destroyed. The remaining 28 were scrambling to recover, their carefully planned formation completely broken. First blood to humanity, Admiral Rodriguez announced. All units advance. The full engagement lasted 6 hours. Victor barely left the command center. He directed repair teams to damaged vessels, talked pilots through system failures, rerouted power when conduits overloaded. He learned that war was chaos, that equipment failed at the worst possible moments. That training could only take a crew so far. He also learned that humans were exceptionally good at adapting under pressure. Midway through the battle, Pallid Cruiser took a direct hit to its primary weapons array. The captain, a former Navy commander named Richard Okonkwo, reported that the ship was combat ineffective and dead in the water. Garage, we have lost both main plasma cannons. All backup systems are offline. We are completely exposed out here. Victor immediately pulled up the cruiser schematics on his main screen. He had personally repaired this specific ship 4 months ago. He knew every system, every backup pathway, every design quirk. Captain, there is a manual override junction on Deck 3, Section 7. You need to physically reroute power from life support reserves. Can you get someone there in the next 90 seconds? Already moving. Victor watched the telemetry while counting seconds. The cruiser was drifting without power, exposed and helpless. 3 Cathari fighters were closing rapidly for what would be an easy kill. Override engaged, Okonkwo reported. Rerouting power now. The cruiser's weapons array came back online at 50% capacity. It was barely enough, but barely enough was sufficient. The plasma cannons fired just as the 3 Cathari fighters completed their attack run. 2 of them vanished in expanding fireballs. The third veered away at maximum speed, its pilot clearly shocked by the unexpected resistance. Garage, we are back in the fight. Moving to support Admiral Rodriguez's position. Moments like that happened dozens of times throughout the battle. Improvisation under fire. Desperate adaptation. Solutions that no training manual had ever anticipated. Executed under impossible pressure by people who had learned to think like mechanics solving problems, not by the 4th hour. The Cathari fleet had lost over 140 ships. They had arrived expecting to destroy a primitive species with salvage technology. They found something completely different. A fleet that understood their technology better than they did themselves. Pilots who had trained specifically for this kind of desperate, close-quarters combat. They are pulling back, Elena reported, her voice exhausted but triumphant. The Cathari advance force is withdrawing to the main fleet. Do not pursue, Admiral Rodriguez ordered. Return to defensive positions. Garage full status report. Victor examined his screens carefully. Red warning lights blinked across dozens of ships, indicating damage ranging from minor systems to severe structural problems. But the green lights, the systems that were still fully functional, outnumbered them significantly. We have lost 129 ships destroyed. Another 215 with significant damage of various types. But Admiral, we destroyed over 140 of theirs. The exchange rate is substantially in our favor. And the main fleet? Victor expanded his tactical display to show the larger strategic picture. The Cathari main fleet, the remaining 200 warships, plus the weapons platforms, had stopped advancing entirely. They were holding position well outside Earth's orbital defense zone. They are reconsidering their approach, Victor said. They expected this engagement to be simple and quick. It was neither. The question now is whether they are willing to pay the full price, too. Continue. The answer came 3 hours later in a transmission broadcast on all frequencies. Cathari High Commander appeared on every screen in the command center. A massive ancient being radiating cold calculation. Creatures of Earth, you have fought with unexpected capability. You have inflicted losses we did not anticipate. But do not mistake a tactical setback for actual victory. We have substantial reserves. We have allies who share our concern about your species. And we possess something you do not have: time. Victor leaned forward, studying the alien's expression. We will withdraw temporarily. But we will return. Not in years, but in days. When we return, we will not bring an enforcement fleet. We will bring the full armada of the Cathari Concordat. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier we can mobilize. And we will not stop until your planet is no longer a threat to galactic security. The transmission ended. The command center fell silent. Admiral Rodriguez's weary voice came through the channel. All units, stand down from combat status. Initiate emergency repair protocols. We have approximately 72 hours before the Cathari can mobilize their complete military. Victor looked at the damage reports covering his screens. 129 ships destroyed. Hundreds more damaged. They had won the battle, but the war was only beginning, and the enemy was returning with absolutely everything they possessed. Garage to all stations, Victor announced. I need complete damage assessments and realistic repair timelines on every damaged vessel. We are going to fix everything we can, salvage useful parts from what we cannot, and be completely ready when they return. His mechanics responded with acknowledgments from facilities across the planet. 18 months ago, Victor Webb had been a retired mechanic who simply wanted to work on classic cars in peace. Now he was coordinating the repair of humanity's only defense. Against an approaching alien armada, he got to work immediately. Victor slept for 4 hours total during the first 2 days. His mechanics fared no better. Across 20 facilities spanning the globe, teams worked continuously to repair damaged spacecraft and prepare for the coming assault. News of the battle had leaked to the public almost immediately. There was no way to hide a space battle visible from Earth's surface. Governments issued careful statements about defensive actions and ongoing negotiations, but footage of burning ships spread across every news channel. Humanity understood it was at war with an alien civilization. What humanity did not understand, what Victor and Colonel Dunn were only beginning to comprehend, was that the galaxy was watching everything with intense interest. We are receiving communications, Dunn reported on the second day. Her voice carried a note of bewilderment that Victor had never heard from her before. Not from the Cathari, from other species. Dozens of them. Victor was elbow-deep in the propulsion system of a badly damaged pallid cruiser. What kind of communications? Mostly encrypted. Our translation teams are still working through them. But preliminary analysis suggests they are interested, very interested, in us, in what we accomplished. We defended ourselves. That is hardly revolutionary. Victor. Dunn's voice was strange now. You do not understand the significance. Some of these communications are coming from species that have been subject to Cathari influence for centuries. species that have never seen anyone successfully resist them. They are asking questions. How did we accomplish this? How did we figure out technology that they themselves could not repair? How did a species that achieved spaceflight less than 50 years ago fight the Cathari to a standstill? Victor extracted a burned-out component and held it up to the light. Crystalline, fractured along familiar stress lines. The same type of failure he had been repairing for 18 months. We fixed things. That is everything we did. We took what they threw away and made it work again. That is exactly what they want to understand. Victor, some of these species are offering concrete assistance. They are sending technical specifications, tactical intelligence, even ships. She paused meaningfully. A pallid delegation is currently en route with 12 cruisers. They want to study our repair techniques. Victor set down the component. 12 cruisers is substantial. They are not the only ones responding. A species called the Morith, one we have never encountered before, is sending a diplomatic mission. They possess spacecraft that the Cathari have never been able to operate correctly. Vessels that have been sitting in their museums for centuries because no one could understand the engineering. They want us to repair their ships. They want to learn how we repair ships. They want to study our methods. Dunn laughed with disbelief and hope. Victor, for the first time since this crisis began, I believe we might have actual allies. The Cathari Armada arrived precisely on schedule. 72 hours after their initial withdrawal, exactly as promised. Over 400 warships ranging from destroyers to massive dreadnoughts. Support vessels, troop transports, weapons platforms capable of planetary bombardment from orbit. It was the largest military force the Cathari had assembled in 1,000 years. It was also facing something the Cathari had never anticipated. Multiple contacts entering the system, Admiral Rodriguez reported from the flagship. Not from the Cathari approach vector. Multiple species signatures. Pallid, Morith, and... His voice caught with emotion. Dreth. A full Dreth battle fleet. Victor watched his screens as new icons appeared. Friendly icons displaying transponder codes his systems recognized from the spacecraft they had repaired. The pallid cruisers arrived first, their chrome hulls gleaming against the darkness. Then the Morith, in vessels that looked organic and angular simultaneously. And finally, emerging from what appeared to be a fold in space itself, 8 massive Dreth carriers. Each one as large as the flagship humanity's pilots had been flying. Garage, this is Admiral Rodriguez. Please confirm you're seeing this. I am seeing it, Admiral. I am having difficulty believing it. That makes 2 of us. A moment of charged silence. The Dreth are hailing us. They are requesting permission to join our defensive formation. Permission granted, Victor said immediately. The Allied fleet, because that was precisely what it had become, formed up around the human positions. Pallid cruisers took flanking positions, their advanced weapons complementing human-crewed vessels. Morith ships spread in patterns that seemed to bend space around them. Dreth carriers deployed fighter wings. Thousands of small craft that would transform the coming battle into 3-dimensional chaos. The Cathari Armada stopped its advance. Victor imagined the confusion on their flagship. They had come to destroy an isolated, primitive species. Instead, they found a coalition that should not exist. Species that had never cooperated before, united by common interest in a planet that had accomplished the impossible. We are being hailed by the Cathari High. Commander, Rodriguez reported, put the transmission through. The alien's image filled Victor's screen. The cold fury from before was replaced by something resembling calculation. Humans, you have assembled allies. This is unexpected, but it changes nothing. We possess the numbers to overwhelm any force you can field. Victor found himself speaking before he could reconsider. High Commander, I am just a mechanic. I understand very little about military strategy or interstellar politics. But I understand something about numbers. The alien's attention focused directly on him. You are the one who repaired the ships. I am one of many. There are thousands of us now, spread across my planet. Mechanics, engineers, technicians. People who learned how to repair what you discarded. Victor gestured at his screens. Do you know what I have learned during the past 18 months? I learned that every species in this galaxy has the same fundamental problem. You build things, you use them until they malfunction, and then you discard them. You do not repair them. You do not even attempt to. Your point. My point is that your armada is impressive. 400 ships. But how many of them have unresolved maintenance issues? How many have systems that do not function correctly? Problems your engineers have simply learned to tolerate. How many would perform better if someone had taken time to diagnose and repair the underlying causes instead of ignoring them? The High Commander remained silent. I have repaired ships from almost every species that visited Earth. And I noticed something consistent. The engineering is different, but the problems are identical. Thermal expansion, stress fractures, worn components, things that fail because nobody designed them for indefinite operation. Victor leaned forward. Your armada came here to destroy a planet full of mechanics. Consider what that means. We are the people who fix things, and we are offering to fix things for anyone who requests our help. You cannot possibly. I am not finished. Victor had never interrupted an alien military commander before. It felt surprisingly liberating. Right now, you are facing a fleet that includes ships from your neighbors, your historical rivals, and species you have never even encountered. They are here because we offered them something you never provided. We offered to teach them how to repair their own technology. We offered to share knowledge instead of hoarding it. We offered to be genuinely useful to the galaxy. The High Commander's expression shifted. Calculations were occurring behind those alien eyes. You have approximately 6 hours before your armada reaches engagement range. 6 hours to decide whether you want to fight a war that will cost you most of your fleet, or whether you want to consider a different arrangement entirely. One where humanity does not threaten you because we are too. Occupied repairing things for everyone else in the galaxy. Silence stretched across the Kelly. Communication channel dot, then the Kethari High Commander. Did something Victor had not anticipated. The alien laughed. Mechanic of Earth, you have given me something I have not experienced in a very long time. You have genuinely surprised me. Twice in 3 days, your species has accomplished what no one expected. First you fought successfully. Now you bargain. Is it working? It is being seriously considered. The High Commander's image flickered. You will have your 6 hours. Use them wisely. The negotiations took place on the Assembly's judicial platform, with High Chancellor Vorth presiding. Victor attended as an advisor, though really everyone insisted on his presence. The mechanic who started everything needed to witness how it ended. The terms were complex. The Kethari would withdraw their armada permanently. Humanity would share repair techniques with any species that requested them. A new institution would be established, a Galactic Mechanics Guild, headquartered on Earth. The spacecraft collection that had triggered everything would become the foundation of a new interstellar service industry. You understand the implications? Ambassador Marcus Cole said quietly, standing beside Victor as final documents were prepared. We are not merely avoiding war. We are fundamentally changing the galaxy. The knowledge you developed in that garage will spread to every civilization that wants it. Victor watched representatives signing the agreement. Kethari, Pallid, Dreth, Morith, a dozen species he could not identify. Good. That is what knowledge is meant to do. Some officials back home are concerned. They believe we are surrendering our only advantage. Our advantage was never the knowledge itself. It was the willingness to apply it. Victor thought about his daughter, who had always joked that he loved engines more than anything else. She had been correct in ways she could never have imagined. The Kethari could have learned the same techniques I developed. Any species could have. But they did not, because they did not think like mechanics. They thought like owners. They believed things were supposed to function until they failed. Then you replaced them. And humans think differently. Humans think everything can be repaired if you are willing to take it apart and understand what went wrong. Victor smiled. That is what I told every apprentice I ever trained. Do not fear the engine. Do not assume it is too complicated to understand. Get your hands dirty. Learn how it functions. And when it breaks, fix it. Now you are teaching that philosophy to the entire galaxy. Someone needed to. Victor looked at the document being finalized, bearing signatures from species that had traveled between stars when Earth was still forming from cosmic dust. His daughter would have found this situation absolutely hilarious. A mechanic from Nevada negotiating with alien civilizations. She had always said he was too stubborn to recognize when something was beyond his capabilities. She was correct about the stubbornness. But nothing was truly beyond anyone. That was the entire point. You simply had to be willing to try. 2 years later, the Galactic Mechanics Guild had grown beyond anything Victor had imagined. Facilities on 6 continents trained technicians from 40 species. Human mechanics had become the most sought-after specialists in the galaxy. Their reputation for solving impossible problems, spreading to civilizations that had never heard of Earth. Before Victor himself had finally retired to a small workshop attached to the Nevada facility. He still consulted occasionally, still got his hands dirty when particularly interesting problems arose. But mostly he watched the organization he had accidentally created change the universe. On the wall of his workshop hung a single old photograph, faded and worn. A Kethari scout sitting in an underground hangar, its engine housing open to reveal a cracked intake manifold. The spacecraft that had started everything. Victor was studying that photograph when his communication panel activated. Colonel Dunn's familiar voice filled the workshop. Mr. Webb, we have something I believe you will want to see. What is it this time? Another diplomatic situation? Another species requesting our assistance? Better. One of our deep space survey teams discovered something on the far side of the moon. A facility we missed during our original inventory. It appears to be extremely old, perhaps thousands of years, and it contains spacecraft that do not match any known species in the assembly registry. Victor felt the familiar stirring of curiosity, the mechanic's instinct that had driven his entire life. Completely unknown origin? Entirely unknown. Our analysts have never encountered technology like this. The engineering principles do not match anything in our database. Dunn paused. The team leader reports the propulsion system appears damaged, some kind of crystalline fracture. She thought perhaps you might want to examine it personally. Victor stood up, reaching for the toolbox that had accompanied him through more crises than he could count. Outside his window, the Nevada desert stretched to the horizon, unchanged after all these years. But beyond that horizon, across the vast distances between stars, an entire galaxy waited for the next lesson from Earth's mechanics. Send me the coordinates, Colonel. I am on my way.